Hello, everybody. I'm George from Ireland. Welcome back to my channel. This is about President Donald J. Trump's phone conversation with Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin. And that was just a couple of days ago. So it's a 2-hour call. And we didn't get a complete transcript, but we got some sort of summary of it from the United States point of view. Now, Donald Trump has come out overpromising as usual or lying that talks between Ukraine and Russia shall start immediately with a view to ending the war. Now, here we are about 48 hours on, and there's no sign that's happened. Now, I can't think the time Trump's had a 2-hour conversation with any other world leader. So it shows how in hoc to Putin he is. So Trump, who has taken the side of Russia against a US ally, Ukraine, taken the side of the aggressor against the victim. Remember, the United States signed that Budapest Memorandum back in 1994, ratified by Congress, that it was to defend Ukraine and so forth, having persuaded the Ukrainians to give up their nuclear arsenal to Russia for free. Well, the Ukrainians think that was obviously a great mistake. This war never would have started had they had it, and so on. Anyway, the United States, which in 2008 at the Bucharest summit of NATO came out say, yeah, we look forward to welcoming Ukraine into NATO. Had Ukraine actually been welcomed to NATO, again, this war would not have started. And so it goes on. Trump, 20,000 lies on the record in his first term. Goodness knows how many in this second term of his. Trump, who was going to end the war in one day, well over 100 days later, has reneged on his promise, has failed because he is a massive failure again. But Trump was characteristically ebullient about this, promising success and obviously under delivering. Now he said that the talk had gone very cordially with his soulmate Putin. So Putin said he is prepared to work on a memorandum towards possible future peace negotiations. See how he's qualified it? Possible future peace negotiations. That means he has absolutely no intention of doing so. Now, Putin reckons that he's on a winning streak. So why would he settle now? Why quit whilst you're ahead? And he thinks he'll break through sometimes. Now he's quite delusional. And the Ukrainians are being pushed back very slowly around Pokrovsk. I'm just staggered the Ukrainians have managed to hold it. I thought it was going to fall months ago. Now a trickle could turn into a flood, but Putin's impetus could stop. It could go the either way. But as I said from the very beginning, I cannot see this war ending with Ukraine retaking all its lost territory, particularly Crimea. They might get back a little bit of the other regions, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, Lugansk, and goodness, what's the fourth one? It'll come to me, Kherson. But I don't think they'll get back all of them, not by a long shot. Anyway, so there have been talks at the beginning of the war. There were talks last week, and as Medinsky, that ultra-nationalist so-called historian, distortionist, who came in to read the riot act to the Ukrainians to tell them that they're not Ukrainian. So that didn't go down well. Surprise, surprise, when they met in Istanbul. So remember, the United States and most European countries have said there needs to be a 30-day unconditional ceasefire. And Putin didn't even engage with that point, which signifying yet again he's not the slightest intention of doing so. Usually, at least pretends and adds provisos. Well, I'll do it on condition, blah blah blah. They're saying no conditionality. So it was a one-on-one phone call with Trump. Obviously, he had an interpreter, and Putin doesn't speak English either. So President Zelensky, he later spoke to Trump, saying that, yeah, he wants an unconditional ceasefire. So Zelensky is bending over backwards to show how amenable he is, because he knows how brittle Trump's ego is. If Zelensky stands up for his country, Trump might cut off all military aid again. And actually, the military aid from the United States now is much less than it was under the Biden administration. But the United Kingdom recently increased sanctions on Russia because there's so little trade between the UK and Russia, it makes little difference. Goodness. So, and as President Volodymyr Zelensky has pointed out, there can be no decisions about Ukraine without Ukraine. It's Ukrainian territory that Trump would purport to give away, not US territory. If he wants to give away some American soil, go ahead. That's up to him. But it's not up to him to give away someone else's land. What right does Trump have to give away somebody else's country? Like, what right does he have to Palestine? None. Like, what right would Russia have to any of the United States? So Anyway, the so-called memorandum, which Trump has talked about, there'd be no particulars coming out about that one. And then on Truth Social, the most misnamed page of the internet, Donald J had the following to say: Russia and Ukraine will immediately start negotiations towards a ceasefire and, more importantly, an end to the war, and so on. So I am very pessimistic about this one. And so the only way to end the war is by arming Ukraine so much that the cost for Russia is so high that the Russians sue for peace. And it might not end decisively with a signature. It might sputter out. It might become a low level of a frozen conflict. Look at the Korean Peninsula. Even then, they're sniping across the ceasefire line. The North Koreans, they've sunk South Korean warships in the last 20 years, things like that. Occasionally they have sort of sent assassins, but it's nothing like a full-scale conflict. I think that's more realistic. Or the Indo-Pakistan conflict in Jammu and Kashmir, and their terrorist attacks on India quite regularly, sometimes air raids and stuff. But that's far less than a full-scale war in which millions of people would be killed. Goodness. So yeah, Trump's not engaging in real diplomacy. He's obviously just too thick, doesn't understand the situation, doesn't want to understand the situation. Now, Trump has said that the United States shall withdraw from negotiations if he doesn't see headway being made. Fine, but you should therefore force Russia to come to the table by arming the Ukrainians to the teeth. That's the only way to do that. Why on earth would Putin give in to weakness? And he recognized that Trump is completely invertebrate, is a backstabber, has betrayed many people who are close to him, and so on. So goodness. And Putin, he interrupted his visit to Sochi, a sort of resort town on the Black Sea, to have the conversation. And to underscore his real intentions, Russia fired about 100 missiles at Ukraine that day, and so on. Goodness. So the Russian readout of the call is not so pacific. What on earth is going to happen? So President Zelensky, he has thanked Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission, for being so indefatigable in trying to bring peace. The new Pope Leo XIV, the Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Meloni, they're saying they've got to do what they can to try and bring peace. Obviously, the Holy See is neutral in this conflict, but Italy, being a NATO and European Union member, it backs Ukraine. I know NATO doesn't have a corporate view on this, but almost all NATO countries are donors to Ukraine. Turkey is not, has got no sanctions on Russia whatsoever. Slovakia and Hungary have got minimal sanctions and are no longer military donors to the Ukrainians. They're trying to curry favor with the Kremlin and get cheap oil and gas and so on. Goodness. So Andrei Yermak, who's Zelensky's right-hand man, he correctly said Putin wants war. He does. He launched this war. So much for the Olympic truce. He launched it during the Beijing Winter Olympics. The 2008 war against Georgia was launched during the 2008 Summer Olympics in Beijing. Now, admittedly, Medvedev was present at the time. Putin was prime minister, but we all know that he was effectively in charge. So I see very little reason to be optimistic about this one. And Trump is just underscoring how dim he is to be upbeat by this. But when he gets friendlier with Putin, that suggests he might loosen sanctions. He might reduce aid or intelligence sharing with the Ukrainians. That's all fairly grim. Although actually, I've found out there are workarounds for the Ukrainians. They can get a lot of the intelligence they need from other NATO countries, from satellites, open sources, presumably got spies and agents inside Russia, which is why they carried out some hits on top Russian military officers. Right. Thanks for watching the channel. Make sure you subscribe on Patreon, donate to PayPal, georgecallan79@gmail.com. Goodbye.